Hello, everyone. This is Michael Doucette, Chair of the Newburyport Community Preservation Committee, and I'd like to call our committee's meeting to order. First thing I'll do is take attendance and ask those in attendance to signify your presence after I call your name. Chuck Griffin.
Present.
Paul Healy.
Present.
Jane Healy.
Here.
Don Little.
I am here.
Joe Morgan.
Present.
Mark Rosen.
Here.
Don Walters.
Here.
And Tom O'Brien is absent. Hey, welcome committee members and applicants and members of the public who have joined us. Tonight, we have a full agenda, and the first item that we will address are our one emergency motion for presenting an application on an emergency basis. Before I do that, later in the agenda, where we have presentations from applicants, our intent is to have you be assured that the committee members have read your applications and are familiar with them, and that your presentation will help us most. Number one, if you could highlight what you consider to be the most salient points that we should focus on. Number two, to add any information that is not in your application that you believe is important. And third, leave enough time for all of our questions to be addressed that we may have after your presentation. And we're hoping that each applicant can limit the presentation and the questions from the committee and answers to 15 to 20 minutes. So the next item, or the first item, is number 2 on your printed agenda, and it's the Knock Tennis Court project emergency application that is to be, I believe, addressed tonight by Steve Morgan. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
Okay, Steve, thank you. Steve, you have the floor, and I'd like you, in telling us about the reason for the emergency nature of this application, also the need you may have or not have for a quick decision to be made by the committee in order to be able to, for instance, go out to bid or something like that.
Right.
So Steve, you have the floor on the tennis court emergency application. We will, Steve, before you start, be needing to take it in 2 steps. After we hear you, we'll need to vote on whether to accept it on an emergency basis. And then, depending upon your timing needs, whether we will be able to vote to approve it or recommend it or not. So Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. And thank you all for having us here tonight and considering this emergency grant for the Knock Tennis Court project. I'll jump right into it. I know you've got a full agenda. So as you probably recall, last year, you approved $175,000 for this project that was based on approximately $25,000 for the design fees and $150,000 for construction, which was based on a budget quote that we had received from Vermont Tennis Court Surfacing back in the January of 2021. So that's where the original request for $175,000 came from. Unfortunately, obviously, since then, like everything else, construction costs have risen. And over the winter, as we worked on the bid documents with Huntress Associates, there were a lot more details that went into the bid documents than were on the original quote from Vermont Tennis Court. There were things like trees that need to be removed along the fence line in the existing. There's some additional drainage work because the expanded size of the tennis courts, the storm drain that lands inside the fence area, so that had to be worked out. A little bit of additional fencing work. The backboard that the community wanted to put into the tennis courts on one side was not included in that original budget quote that was received. So all those things together added to the project. Like I said, we worked on the bid documents over the winter with Huntress Associates. We made them available to contractors in February of this year. They were sent out directly to about 24 contractors that were identified as potential bidders for this project. We also posted in the Central Register and in Combis, which are procurement tools run by the Commonwealth that we're required to use. And we advertised in a local newspaper. So on March 10th, we received 3 bids back from, I don't know if you can read the document there. It's kind of small on my screen. But from Green Acres.
Can you change the, Zoom? Yeah, I think you did it already. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we received
Sorry for the interruption.
we received the 3 bids. And Vermont Recreation came in as the low bidder at about $186,000 on the base bid and $8,900 for alternate number 1, which would allow us to construct the sidewalk that's just outside the tennis court out of concrete rather than asphalt. And we wanted to do that for basically 2 reasons. One, because the city's kind of tending towards concrete sidewalks rather than asphalt wherever possible. And 2, to kind of help delineate that from a visual perspective for the kids walking into the school from Johnson Street. The driveway and that sidewalk are right at the same elevation. We were unable to put a curb there because of drainage issues to raise that sidewalk up above the driveway. So we thought that the concrete would just give a little bit more of a visual separation there between the driveway and the sidewalk and help with a little bit of safety along with the bollards that are along that driveway. So with that, our new budget then becomes a bit higher than what we had expected. You can go to the next page on that if you would. Thank you. So with the design fees at about $25,000, the legal ad costs and the bids from Vermont Recreation, our total project cost now comes to $220,343, which leaves us with a budget shortfall of about $45,000. So we are here to request a supplemental grant of $50,000, which would provide us with a small contingency in case anything else comes up during the construction process. We are a bit on a time-sensitive nature here. In order to get this project done over the summer when the school is vacated, we want to do that because it's right on that busy corner of Johnson Street and the entrance into the Knock Middle School. So we want to be able to get it done over the summer when there's not so much activity there. And we don't want to lose this bidder by dragging this out too long. Because as you probably see on that list of bidders, the next bidder on the list is about another $50,000 higher than the low bidder was. So we really want to get this under contract as quickly as we can, so we can move this forward this summer. So that's basically what I have. The third page in my presentation is just the recommendation letter from Huntress Associates to award the project to Vermont Recreation. They did reference checks on them. And they've actually worked, Huntress has actually worked with Vermont Recreation before. So they're very confident that they can handle the job and recommend that we award the contract to them. So I will take whatever questions you may have.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions now from committee members? If you have them, please raise your hand.
I have a question.
Okay, Mark Rosen.
Hi, Steve, I'm sorry, but who do you represent?
Hi, Mark. I'm the Director of Facilities for the schools.
Okay, all right. And have you managed construction projects like this before?
Yes, I have.
All right, good. That's great. I just want to point out that $50,000 is no small amount. It's approximately 5% of our total budget that we give out every year. That's number one. And you're actually asking for a 29% increase for your request. I had some questions in the first place about the project being a true recreation project for us to consider, because it, you know, in the criteria, it's supposed to support multiple recreation uses and serve a significant number of residents. And I don't see any evidence to either one of those requirements. From what I understand, it's going to be primarily used. The intention of the project was for the school's tennis team, which, as I understood it, during the time period that you were requesting for the money, it was only a girls' team. That was a concern of mine also. And it's serving a significant number of residents to me, with tennis being overrun by pickleball these days. It doesn't seem to fit. So those two factors alone are a reason why I cannot support your request for this additional funds.
All right, let me just mention, I hear what you're saying. This project was actually initiated by a group of residents who banded together to get this project moving, to build support, because there is a need for tennis courts in this town, this city. In addition to the public and the high school team, eventually, the courts would be used by the PE classes at the middle school and the Mullen School to introduce them to the sport of tennis as well.
Steve, in the original presentation for the last, for the project itself, there was some talk about by adding these courts in the full scope, not only the ones that are for this application, but the ones that are planned adjacent to it, you could then host tournaments and have enough courts to do that. Am I remembering that correctly?
That's correct, Mike, yes.
Okay, good. Don Walters, is your hand up? Yes, it is.
It is.
Okay.
Thank you. A couple of questions. I think maybe, Mike, the first one is for you. Would you mind explaining what this emergency application is for? Is for us to put it with the rest to accept it, and then in turn, we'll eventually go to the city council and go through their entire process, which perhaps may mean this will get approved, I don't know, July, August, September. Am I correct in understanding the timing of this?
Well, if it does not, if we accept it for consideration and potential recommendation as an emergency application, it is not necessary that it be taken with the current docket and the timing that goes through. It can be voted on once we accept it for consideration out of sequence, and then if it's voted to recommend to the city council, it gets shipped off to city council as a standalone on its own, and the applicant then moves with it to city council, hoping to get it approved for appropriation to add to the budget, and as the applicant pointed out, so that they don't miss the construction season and get it going. So that's
Thank you.
the timing that goes with the emergency status. So.
And do we know, Mike, by any chance, or perhaps Caitlin, the planning office has reached out to some of the city council? And not that necessarily means that we should vote on this, but do we have a feel or the pulse of the city council? Will they accept this and make this quickly, make a decision quickly?
Yeah, Don, this is Andy. Caitlin, feel free to weigh in as well. Generally speaking, we've reached out to the council, to the Budget and Finance Chair Committee in particular, and asked whether they'd be willing to sponsor this given the time frame. So obviously, as you've noted, there's additional process for the council, but we're working to make sure that there's a sponsor ready for expedited approval by the council should the CPC make the recommendation.
Thank you. Another point or two, and I think, Mark, you may have asked this question. I represent the planning board on the CPC, and it was interesting when this hit the planning board. We actually raised the same point you did, is why can't we have pickleball, especially with aging population? And in planning board meeting, as I'll do now, as I put myself in that majority. It's interesting, and the planning office had a good point, is they said, actually, of course, the people that want to play pickleball want to play, but the residents don't like it. It actually is more noisy than tennis. And so there is a concern that I don't know where we'll ever find a pickleball court unless it's the private one by the tennis racket club. But anyway, I just wanted to provide a bit of that flavor there. And secondly, Steve, or perhaps to Andy and Caitlin, the planning board, this is my opinion, not the opinion of the planning board, is always good to put on third parties all these requirements, et cetera, to do. And Steve, would you have any estimate of, were there any things that the planning board put on that if you went back to the planning board and asked for a minor amendment to this plan that would save the city money and in turn the CPC funds?
You mean adjustments to the scope of the project, Don?
Yeah, let's just face it, we like to make things pretty, put more trees, do this. I did hear the point about the concrete sidewalk, although I think that was something that the planning board did request. You did, and I will mention, and perhaps it's comparing apples to oranges, Steve, and Andy and Caitlin, again, know much better than I do, but I know we put asphaltic pavement down by the Parker Street, where we connected with the new development there. by the railroad. So it seems to me, I'm not convinced that we're totally consistent, that every new sidewalk will always be concrete. So I would just say, I don't have a strong feeling one or the other, but again, if that perhaps allows one or two more votes by the CPC, you might want to consider that. I think that's all I have right now, Mike. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Paul Healy.
Mike?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we accept this as an emergency and were to vote to send it, recommend it over to City Council, I would kind of like to do it without the cost of the cement walkway, since it wasn't in the plan last time. I don't see why we would really want to fund that. If the city really, really, really wants cement, maybe they can find it in another piece of the budget, but not ours.
Jane Healy, question?
It's my understanding that the CPA does not allow us to fund sidewalks. Is anyone else familiar?
This is Andy. This is Andy. Sorry. Generally speaking, Caitlin, feel free to weigh in if there's more you've discussed with the Preservation Coalition. But generally speaking, the rule is that you're not doing anything to replace work that the city would be doing under the Department of Public Services within the right of way relative to sidewalks or infrastructure on a normal basis. I think that maybe the question here is whether or not it's integrated with the project such that it's required for pedestrian or youth access.
And Steve, is that your feeling that it's integrated into the project enough that it would not fall under their what Andy just explained, excluding it from our funding?
It is because, well, it has to be, the existing sidewalk has to be ripped up in order to construct the new tennis courts. It's just the asphalt there it's all interconnected with the tennis courts there. But having said that, I don't, it wouldn't be a real deal breaker if we didn't do that in concrete. If people are more comfortable leaving that portion of it out, we can still proceed getting the project done this summer.
Yeah.
I have another question, Mike.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. To Paul's point, there are two other items that weren't in the original request also, and that was trees to be removed and drainage work, I believe. And a question for Mike. Which budget does the $50,000 come out of? The new budget, correct?
It comes out of whatever current funds we have available now, yes.
Right. So that would take 50,000 away from all the other requests that we have.
That's correct. There is no recreation reserve.
Okay. And does anybody on the panel or Steve or Andy know of any other sources for this project to raise money instead of CPC?
Well, this is Andy, and feel free. Oh, Caitlin, go right ahead.
Sorry. This is Caitlin. I just wanted to remind the CPC that I touched base with Ethan Manning, the finance director, and the source of these funds for this emergency application would be coming out of the Community Preservation Fund balance, undesignated funds. Right here where my cursor is.
Right. That's part of the budget that we're working with on the whole docket
Correct.
this cycle. Yeah.
This is Andy. I guess to the question about other sources, I would say that the council can always be, a councilor can be requested to move forward, a motion to try to work with other sources of funds. The mayor's office obviously can initiate something like that with the council as well, but to mobilize, say, free cash or some other source. But obviously here the request is rather out to use CPA funds.
Is there any way that we can approve this contingent on exhausting all other possible sources, Michael?
You mean for their budget, their total budget, or are we talking about the sidewalks now?
The 50,000, the total
Uh,
budget,
The whole 50?
yeah,
Mike, might I weigh in on that?
or whatever,
yes.
or, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Andy. Just for
Okay,
clarify, for just to make a point, it would be important to clarify what would be enough to what is the threshold in which one is verified that all those sources have been exhausted. Is that specifically asking all city councilors to to sponsor something to bring forward funds or otherwise? But just a recommendation that wherever this goes, it'd be something that's clear enough that could be implemented or determine whether or not something's in compliance.
Yeah, that would be my concern, is to get a bright line. How do you articulate a bright line test as to, how many doors you have to knock on, things like that, in order to satisfy that condition. Otherwise you'd also have another layer of people wondering how many doors to knock on, depending on how many city councilors are looking at this and saying, okay, have we satisfied the CPC's condition of exhaustion? So as a practical matter, what's happened in the past with projects that the committee believes that other sources of funding should share in it, they just recommend a lesser amount than is requested, and the applicant then is left to his own devices to make the budget. And in this case, since it's a city project, they're going to have it fully funded before they can award the contract.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Michael.
And let me just point out also that when we first received the bids back in March, on March 10th, and we saw where the budget was with regard to that, first thing I did was reached out to Ethan Manning to ask his advice on how we could fill that gap. And it was his feeling at the time that the city council and the mayor would prefer that we went to the CPC for the funds.
Okay, thank you. Don Little, question?
Yeah, a couple things I'd like to speak in favor. Actually, a couple different topics. The criteria of this being available to multiple users. It is my understanding that the restriction to the public is only during school hours and when the school teams reserve it. And I don't really think they use it all day and night. And I certainly don't think they're in school during the summer and possibly not even using it all spring or fall. So I think there's plenty of use by the public. As far as the sidewalks, I believe the application for Fuller Field had sidewalks in it, so I don't know if that's a precedent setting thing. And as far as the emergency part of it, also the concrete sidewalk, I'd be in favor of. I mean, I heard Mr. Bergholm state that it's more of a safety issue to really delineate it from the driveway. That is a very busy driveway at school time, and there isn't much space between the driveway and the sidewalk. So as far as the emergency, I just can't imagine we would say, let's recommend this conditionally. I mean, if we were to recommend this tonight, I would presume there's an order being written up for city council approval as early as tomorrow, and this would need to get approved pretty soon for the bid to get approved.
Steve, for my, just to clarify, that sidewalk we talking about, is that the along Johnson Street or along the driveway parking lot?
It's along the driveway, and it's just the section that's immediately adjacent to the tennis court. It doesn't include the rest of it that goes all the way up to the school.
Right, okay. Thank you. I would echo Don's comment that the concrete would certainly delineate it more clearly than additional asphalt on, as, you know, just blended into the driveway and be a greater safety feature. I also am confident that that is part of the project, a necessary part of the project, and it's not something that would be not eligible for CPA funding. Don Waters, other question?
Yes. Steve, you mentioned that you received the bids, I believe, the beginning of March. How long were the bids, the bid prices effective? And the reason I asked, I'm not trying to set you up, Steve, is, you know, typically it's 30 or 60 days. And my concern is that with them seeing, as you mentioned, the other bidder was, I don't know, 50,000 or plus more, that you know, we can't control going forward. But, you know, I guess if the bidder was not necessarily of highest integrity, and I'm not saying they aren't, but one could expect them to come up with some other excuse to have the bid even higher, since they know the next bidder was even X number of thousands of dollars more. So just a long prelude to what is how long are these bid prices effective for?
The specifications call for us to award the contract within 30 days of the bid opening, excluding weekends and holidays. So basically, I think when I figured it out, we have until April 20th.
Okay. And do you think, or does Andy think, or anyone else think that's practical, realistic for the city council, and maybe bringing it into subcommittee readings, all those things?
This is Andy. I guess I would say it's up to the counselors how they want to handle the matter after the CPC recommendation, if that's brought forward. But generally speaking, it's definitely doable. The council has procedures in place to deal with emergency orders or actions, and if you know, there's a willingness or you know, a shared interest in getting that expedited to stay on schedule. And then I can certainly appreciate, as a fellow project manager, what Steve has to go through and trying to align the different timings of available funds and procurement procedures and so forth. I think that's very important to keep those things and use the timeframes and the processes that align. And I definitely believe it's feasible for the council to do their portion of the action necessary to bring this forward, you know, should the CPC and the council agree that it's worthy of funding.
Thanks, Andy. I'm sure the city council would have a fire lit under them if there was a letter from that lowest bidder saying, if you don't award it, be by such as I'm raising my price, but I won't be so cynical. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, any member of the public that wishes to ask a question, please raise your hand at this time. I see one from Jim McCauley. Jim?
Thank you, Chair. Just as for those who don't know me, I am a member of the City Council, and I was part of Budget and Finance when we approved this 175 out of committee over 6 months ago. So kind of my first question is, you know, why did it take so long for us to actually get a bid out and respond to our bidding request, right? We had done this in the fall.
We started the process of putting the bid specs and the plans together right after the city council approved in the fall, working with the designer. And, you know, basically the ideal time for going out to bid for projects to do in the summer is during the winter. Like I said, we had the bids out in February.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, we were under the impression that the bid documents were ready to go when we voted on it. So, you know, that's a shame on us, I guess, right? Just a couple of comments. Concrete is not necessarily a preferred method anymore. It was with the previous administration. It's not necessarily what we're looking at right now. I think from a safety issue and a costing issue, I think you could replace in kind with asphalt. And if you wanted to highlight things with paint, for safety, you can do it with paint. Mass DOT is doing that on the Route 1 traffic circle to save millions of dollars in expenses, and they're effectively utilizing paint. I think as a suggestion, you might want to be able to do that. I don't see an appetite for the concrete, but I never see an appetite for the sidewalk along the way. CPC and sidewalks don't necessarily blend together. Ever since the landmark Norwell case, and I'm an originalist on that, which I'll say. The group of residents that kind of started this was actually friends of Newburyport Tennis, which were supporters of the high school teams along the way. So it doesn't necessarily have broad community support, although this is a school facility, and I've always thought that the school has a building fund and maintenance dollars within their $36 million budget that they probably could look through and try to reallocate some of these funds going forward. I do know that there is a sponsor for this emergency, and there is an order written, and it'll be in the 28th packet. That's Monday. It'll go to committee, and the next council meeting will be the 11th. If it makes it out of committee, you should be all set. If it doesn't make it out of committee because of any concerns, then you won't make the 20th, as we won't have an additional meeting to be able to award that. I'm concerned about the different line items that show up here that were unbeknownst to everyone involved in the original $175,000 request. I'm not sure if we've explored insourcing some of this work, sourcing over to the Parks Department, for example, cutting down a tree, or DPS cutting down the tree, and trying to scale back some of the actual ask of the funds. I say these things kind of as coaching to Steve, so that these are the things that are going to come out of committee, that will come out of the Budget and Finance Committee, that will scale back regardless of what the CPC committee does and the recommendation they make. I'm just suggesting to you that these are the types of questions you're going to face on the committee from Budget and Finance to be able to scale this back. Thank you. I yield.
Hey, Counselor.
Steve, you just cut out.
I'm sorry, I just said thank you, Counselor.
Okay, good. Any other questions from the public? Okay, then I'd like to first open this up for motion and discussion from the committee on accepting this application on an emergency basis. Do I have a motion?
This is Don Walters. I'll make that motion.
Okay. Motion's been made to accept this application on an emergency basis. Is there any discussion on that limited issue, whether we accept it now?
Do you need a second? I'm sorry, Mike, do you need a second?
Yes, I do.
This is Jane. I'll second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote on accepting this application on an emergency basis. Chuck Griffin,
Yes.
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes.
Joe Morgan,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
No.
Don Walters.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. The motion is passed to accept this on an emergency basis. Now we move to, I'll entertain a motion from the committee on the merits of the application.
Question, please.
Who's that? Mark?
It's
Yes.
Mark, I'm sorry. I'm not clear. Are you saying, what are you asking for now?
Asking for a motion so that we can have some discussion and a motion from a committee member as, you know, to approve in a certain amount.
Yeah, Mike?
So,
Yes, Paul Healy?
Yeah, I would make a motion to approve allocating requesting the city council allocate $40,000 from our reserve funds for this increase in the project cost.
Okay, is there a second?
This is Jane. I second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the application in the amount of $40,000. Any discussion?
Yes,
Chuck Griffin?
I'm the representative of Parks, as you know.
Yes.
And when the issue came before us, the Friends of Newburyport Tennis were behind it, one thing and another, needing courts. And of course, Parks would like to see more of that, including the solution of pickleball, which is on us every month. It received a very low interest among the Parks commissioners. And I've not had a chance to, maybe it's my own fault, to talk to my fellow commissioners to get their view on it. But with what we have in front of us, I'm afraid that I would have to vote no on this application.
Thanks, Chuck. Don Walters?
yes. I'd like to know if we could also provide a condition, and I think we can make it specific, subject to Caitlin and Andy's, and of course, the rest of the committee's approval. My sense is that there's some consensus. I know, and I realize we haven't voted to have this asphaltic, and there's multiple ways to delineate it. Painting was one suggestion, et cetera. I thought the counselor McCauley made an excellent suggestion that sometimes that our in-house services, DPW, DPU, whatever, can cut down trees, whatever, and could be more economical. So I would like to see if we would approve this and of the $40,000 I suggested. Subject to that, the DPW, for whatever reason, says they cannot take down those trees. I think the drainage is probably a bit more complicated, and I noted that Chairman McCauley didn't necessarily suggest that, although none of us have done an exhaustive study on what would be required and what is the skill level, et cetera, of the DPW. But I think cutting down trees, removing trees is something they've done. They actually just did it today in front of my street. So if that's possible, Mike, I'd like to throw that condition in there. So it's up to $40,000, but it would be less if DPW says that they can do that. If they save 1,000 or 5,000, it is what it is. So I don't know if that makes sense, Mike. Thank you.
My comment on that would be, the request is 50. Steve, the request is 50, 45 plus 5.
The request is 50,
Yep.
but that includes the sidewalk being concrete. So if
Great.
the committee's more comfortable with 40,000, then the sidewalk remains asphalt as it is now.
Right.
Okay. Gotcha. And do you have how much was the tree elements in the quote? Was that a line item?
No, that was not delineated.
Okay.
We'd have to
Okay.
go back and research that.
All right. So if we were to condition it, Don, is your condition that none of the money be used for the trees?
Oh.
I'm sorry, Mike, it would be used for the trees if the DPW said they could not do it for whatever reason,
Right.
that they were, that
Oh,
would be the
I see.
condition.
I see. Okay.
This is Andy, if I could just,
Mike, maybe if in the letter to the city council, we could say that, we're authorizing up to 40,000. But we would suggest that the applicant attempt to see if they can reduce the cost of the tree removal by using city resources.
Mhm.
We don't have to say that that's a demand on our side, just a recommendation that people try to work together to save some money.
Okay. Chuck, do you have something else?
No,
Chuck Griffin?
I didn't raise my hand, have I?
It's still
Well,
up
I
there,
see.
but
I see. I'm
okay.
sorry. I didn't lower it.
Thank you. Jane Healy?
I'm remembering back to last year's application and just in terms of public benefit and public support, I remember there were several letters of support from residents along Johnson Street. So I don't want to forget that. I'm in support of the 40,000 to the exclusion of the sidewalk. So that's why I was in support, or that's why I'm in support of the 40 versus the 50. And in terms of use, I have a son who just started the tennis team, so I'll put that out there. But it is amazing how the boys tennis team is coming along. I guess 4 years, there were just a few students. Last year, there was 17, and now there's over 30. And so someone had mentioned there was just a girls team, but there's a boys team too, and they all have to go half the time to Triton because there's just not enough courts in the city. So there's quite a few people out there that are looking for more courts in Newburyport.
Mark Rosen?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to reiterate that I heard from, well, first let me say that I heard from two people this evening, one from the public, Jim McCauley, and one from a member of the Parks Committee, that they clearly see that there is not broad support in the community for spending this kind of money for tennis courts. I heard that from two people who I think have their fingers on the pulse of where they need to be. I think the letters from a few people on Johnson Street are in the category of anecdotal and have no meaning in terms of broad support. And especially, we have a responsibility to the criteria under which we operate, that any project we approve must support multiple recreation uses and serve a significant number of residents. I've been on this committee, 3 years, and we've never said no to any request. Never once have we said no to any request. This is the first time I honestly believe that we must stop, our rubber stamping of every request that comes through our committee. We must obey the rules under which we are supposed to operate. And the only way for them to seek other sources of funds, as has been explained tonight, is for us to say no. And understanding that the bids did not go out in a fashion that could have prevented this request in the first place, I don't think it's appropriate as well to have to come up with another 50,000 when that could have been avoided potentially. Thank you very
Um,
much.
Mark, briefly, I believe the language of the criteria indicates that ideally, in terms of hierarchy of approval of competing projects, that serving multiple items is the ideal, and then you work down from there. I don't think that there's a requirement that a recreational category serve
Well,
multiple. Is that
well, exactly. The first bullet is support multiple recreation uses. Okay, so we go
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
second bullet, serve a significant number of residents. Okay,
Right.
so we have a problem with the first two bullets. Expand the range of recreational opportunities available to city residents of all ages. That's a little warmer. Jointly benefit Conservation Commission and Parks Commission's initiatives. Neither one of those have anything to do with this proposal. Maximize the utility of land already owned by the city. I don't think that applies. And promote the creative
Well,
use of.
I think it does, Mark, if you consider what's there now.
Okay, fine. You know, that's debatable. Sure. I see your point. And promote the
Okay.
creative use of railway and other corridors, etc. So again, I'm just trying to play by the rules. I'm
Gotcha.
just seeing it black and white here. I'm not, listen, I don't play tennis. I used to. I mean, I would love it for this school to be able to provide the kids in school those tennis courts. I do see that there's a benefit there. And if I did play tennis, instead of going to Perkins where they're always playing pickleball now, I would have another option. And are there any other tennis courts in the city? Anybody know?
Atkinson.
I think so too. So it's clear to me, and I just want to encourage us to look at the rules and play by the rules. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the committee? I'd like to clarify between Paul's motion and Don's comment whether there's a request to amend the motion to include the recommendation that the up to $40,000, the up to be added, as well as the recommendation that the city be looked to have in-house personnel do the tree work. Is that, Don, is that what you did, an amendment you were requesting?
It was initially, but I do think that the suggestion to forward this, if this is approved, to request other city services to look into assisting this, I would be okay with that, as compared to amending the motion that I think is on the floor.
Mike, I think including that as an amendment to the motion would be fine. It's just saying that in our recommendation that is one of the things that we would suggest that they also consider, that the city council also consider.
I guess I'm unclear. What's the motion, Paul? What's your motion?
The motion would be to the city council that would we request they authorize up to $40,000 for this project, not including the cement sidewalk, and that they should consider out of that 40,000, that if the city services can provide some help with some cost saving with regards to the tree removal, that we would then not expend the entire 40,000.
I don't know if you'd be able to actually make that effective, because a contract's a contract. And
Yeah.
they either have to sign a contract as is or request another bid.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, then,
So,
why
you know,
don't we just then proceed with the, my
If-
original motion?
if you think if what you're saying is you're implying that we're allocating too much money. That's your feeling, that we're allocating too much money and they should go look for money elsewhere as well, is what you're implying by that motion anyways. So perhaps your motion should be 25,000.
Well, as I understand it, what we have from the original motion is a recommendation to the city council to appropriate $40,000 to this, an additional $40,000 to this project.
Right.
That's what's in front of us.
Okay, and that was my original motion, and that was seconded. Then I think Don proposed an amendment. Don, do we want to just take that amendment off the table?
That was just discussion. Yes, I'm happy to retract it
Yeah.
and bringing that point up, and it would just be covered by a transmittal letter to the
Yeah,
city council, whomever we send it to. Thanks.
Jane Healy?
Yeah, I guess I have two things, pointing out that the concrete sidewalk was 8,900, so there's 1,000 in there that I guess, is the wiggle room maybe for that tree removal if they can't. I don't know. Sorry, forget that. I'm just trying to, I think we'll just take that off the table. I do want to get back to Mark's point about following the rules, because as anyone who knows me, I like to follow the rules too. So I looked up the definition of recreational use in the CPA Act itself, and just reading word for word: active or passive recreational use, including but not limited to the use of land for community gardens, trails, and non-commercial youth and adult sports, and the use of land as a park, playground, or athletic field. And so there's no hierarchy there. So just wanted to read that out.
Okay. Any other discussions from the committee? Okay, then I'd like to call for a vote on the motion. Chuck Griffin,
Regrettably, no.
Paul Healy,
yes.
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes.
Joe Morgan,
I will abstain. I'm not sure, following this discussion, I would have voted in favor of the original 2021 project. So I think I should just bow out right now.
okay. Joe Morgan abstains. Mark Rosen,
No.
Don Walters,
Yes.
chair votes yes. Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda are the list of applicants' presentations from this cycle, the regular cycle. First one on the agenda is the kitchen renovation project for the Ywca of Newburyport. Is anyone here to present?
Well, wasn't that project taken off the list?
No, I don't, not yet, I don't believe. Was
Oh, I
it?
thought there was something that went around that 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 kind of work would not be covered by CPA.
Paul, it will be in a second.
Yes, there has been some correspondence to that effect, but as far as I know,
But nothing official.
nothing official, yeah.
Oh, okay.
John Feehan, are you here to present?
Yeah,
Okay, you have the floor.
thank you very much. And I want to say thank you very much for this opportunity to say a few words. The YWCA was founded in 1883 and in 1890 acquired the Frothingham Estate, which was built in 1790. We've been using it as affordable housing ever since. And when I talk with colleagues, I always say that we have the longest continually operated affordable housing program in the country, that we started in 1890. And they say, well, we've had older affordable housing projects than that. And I say, yes, but in the same building. And they always reply, no, nobody's crazy enough to run affordable housing out of a 200-year-old building, except us here in Newburyport. And the building is currently in very good shape, in large part due to the support of the community and the support of the CPC. When I submitted this application earlier this year, I was not aware that there was a regulation that says that if the property was not purchased, unless the property was purchased with CPA funds, it's not eligible for CPA funding. Of course, we purchased this in 1890, long before CPA funding was in existence. And so we will now have a challenge moving forward with a 200-year-old building that we want to maintain in good condition for our tenants. But given that that is the rule, we are withdrawing our application from the CPA. And what I would hope is that when the Newburyport Affordable Housing Trust presents their request for funding, that you can see it in your hearts to at least award what they've asked for and possibly increase their award if that's at all possible. I know you've got a long night, so I won't take any more of your time unless there are questions.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions from the committee? Jane, did you have a question? No?
No, that was a leftover hand.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, John. Next item. We have priority housing needs, an update of the housing production plan from the Newburyport Affordable Housing Trust. And Madeline Nash is here to present.
Good evening. Thank you. It's great to be here tonight, and thank you for all of the CPC's support over the years. And nice to hear John Feehan say, give us some more money. That's very thoughtful. Anyways, I've been on the Newburyport Affordable Housing Trust since it was formed in 2010. Before that, I was on the CPC, so I know how hard your job is. But since the trust was formed in 2010, I mean, housing issues have only become more pressing. I think most of you are aware that it's very hard for people who grow up in Newburyport to hope to afford their first home here. It's hard for people who work in our local businesses, whether it's a store or a restaurant or teachers, some of the municipal employees, very hard for them to afford rental housing or homeownership housing. Seniors who want to downsize, there's often not a suitable place for them to move to. People with mobility limitations, it's hard for them to find a place where they can age in place safely. There's just a whole host of housing needs facing our community. I'm sure, like I say, I'm sure most of you are aware of this. Another thing is our rental housing stock has shrunk due to condo conversion. So we have a lot of things that we're grappling with, and one of the ways that we try to understand it is with doing a housing production plan every 5 years. And it's time for us to get ready to update ours. Again, the one that we have now doesn't expire until October of 2023. But what we would like to do is hire a consultant to help us to update our housing production plan. That's what we did with our first one. I think that cost about $32,000. We were fortunate with our second housing production plan that the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission was able to do it for the city at no cost. But my understanding is that the Planning Commission will not be available to do that this time. They don't have the funding. So we want to be ready to pull together an RFP and solicit proposals, review the proposals. All of that takes some time. So we're trying to position ourselves with this request to you tonight to give us some funding to cover that cost. The second request is for $200,000 to add to our resources to be ready to support affordable housing initiatives when they present themselves. We know that the Brown School is being considered for conversion to affordable housing for seniors. And that's a really exciting opportunity for the city. However, it will be very expensive to convert that historic building that is in significant need of capital improvements to housing. We've seen it done elsewhere in other communities very successfully, but it is very expensive. And so there's the potential that for these funds, if they were committed, to be used to not only help cover the cost, but also to help position a developer to compete for limited state resources that are available for affordable housing development. So that process, applying to the Department of Housing and Community Development, is extremely competitive. And the way that developers compete for those funds, if they really pretty much have to have a local funding match, especially if a community has CPA funds. The state is going to be looking for the host municipality to have a commitment to make. So again, that is not just to make the application competitive, but also to help cover development costs. Funding from the state is allocated on a per unit basis. So it's just very hard to cover those costs with a pretty, the building is not that big. So it's going to be tough to make the numbers work. We're also certainly hoping that there will be other affordable housing development opportunities. We want to be ready if an opportunity presents itself to us. And so that's really the reason for our request. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Don Walters?
Yes. Would it make any sense for the consultant who's going to update the housing plan if the timing was such that there may be other surrounding communities that needed something where one could get some economy of scale, or even if the timing worked out well, it's just Newburyport is very different than the surrounding communities, and therefore it really doesn't make any sense?
Well, it's a good question. I think that whoever does the report will look not just at the needs in Newburyport, but the surrounding communities, because it really should be a local and a regional perspective. And it also gives you a point of comparison. But I don't know when other communities with CPA funds might be in the position of updating their plans. It's supposed to be done, my understanding is supposed to be done every 5 years. So I don't know that, everybody's going to be on the same calendar. But, it certainly would be worth looking into, is there some opportunity for collaboration with neighboring communities? This is a good point.
Thank you. And just one other quick question. With respect to the fund that you're looking for, which in turn would allow a developer to use those funds and get matching. And would I be correct when you use the word matching? Is it 1-to-1? So $200,000 would be a total of 400,000, or is it some other ratio?
It's not 1-for-1. The way it works, and I must admit that I deal with this in my professional capacity, working for a quasi-state organization called Community Economic Development Assistance Corporation. One of the things that we do is we work with DHCD to review funding applications for the development of affordable housing. So I spent all day long today looking at funding applications, and basically most properties cost approximately $500,000 per unit. It's a ton of money, and there is no percent that is expected from a host municipality. It's certainly not 1-for-1, not even in the city of Boston, where they have so many resources. But I think what's considered at, what the state considers is, well, what does a community like Newburyport have to offer? There's not much CDBG funding anymore. Home dollars are very limited, but the city does have CPA. So that would probably be the likely source. I think it's also true that with municipally owned properties like school buildings, there's an expectation that the host municipality will donate that space. So that's another way that the city can show its commitment to meeting the need for affordable housing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's called matching funds, but it's certainly not 1-to-1.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Chuck Griffin.
Just an observation, Madeline. I'm an architect that's done elderly housing his whole life and affordable housing. I would just encourage you to think twice about Brown School. There's going to be nothing affordable in trying to make that an elderly housing project. If you just simply think about every aspect that makes up a building, Brown School doesn't have any of those things that are usable. It will cost significantly more money than new construction to try to use Brown School. It's just an observation. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. School buildings can be inefficient because they have a lot of non-rentable space, corridors and whatnot. But on the other hand, they are often well situated within a community. The Brown School is in a great neighborhood. It's a resource that we want to see preserved, and this is one way to do that. And also, there aren't really a lot of other development opportunities in Newburyport, unfortunately. So this is a site that the city has control over. And it's a great location, and it's a community asset. It's got historic value. I'm hoping it will be eligible for historic tax credits. But you're right, there's nothing easy about this, and there's nothing inexpensive about this.
Any other questions from committee members? Okay, Councilor McCauley, your hand is up.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one question to the applicant. The Brown School is an asset, and it's very much in play for a number of different roles that we see in play. The council is about to establish a potential of a Brown School ad hoc committee. Frankly, I don't know that their recommendation and movement on that will happen in 2022. And I'm just wondering if there's another use of those funds or a lesser amount of funds that you would look for and allocate those for a different type of use. And again, I'm sure these are kind of the questions that will come up in confirmation hearings.
Well, if you're asking me if we
Thank you.
have other, is that a question for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is a question for you. My question really is, you're asking for $200,000 for money to be allocated to the Brown School for, as you went through, and I won't reiterate what you spoke about, but my point is, I don't know that the Brown School is, I don't know that the City Council is going to make a decision on the Brown School in 2022. And I'm just asking if you think there's a different use for that $200,000 or a request for a lesser amount to do other things like rental assistance or something like that. That's my ask.
Okay. Well, thanks for the question. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Brown School, and we don't know when it's going to happen. The trust is trying to position itself so that it is able to respond when the development opportunity presents itself. We're hopeful about the Brown School, but we realize that it's a complicated process, and we are not making any assumptions. But like I said, we want to be ready, and we know that it's going to, like I've said, it's going to be expensive. And we are also hopeful that there will be other development opportunities. We've had some discussions about some opportunities and needs. So again, we want to be ready when an opportunity presents itself. So it's a little bit like the Open Space Committee, where they don't always know exactly what's going to present them to them in terms of an opportunity. We want to do what we can to assemble funds so that we're in a good position. And often, there might be a case where time is of the essence.
Thank you. Any other members of the public have questions? Please raise your hand. I see none. Final opportunity for questions from the committee. Okay, thank you, Madeline. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, next applicant is the Old South Church clock paint restoration.
Hi, yeah, this is Jack Santos, and thank you all for having me. Can you hear me okay, first of all?
Yes, Jack, thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you all for having me here at the committee. And I'm here to kind of make the case for a community treasure. There's probably nobody on this call that isn't familiar with the Old South clock. Next slide, please. And specifically, we're asking for funding for the clock face. It's the hands, the numerals, the black face behind them, the minute markers. They're rapidly deteriorating and need a paint. It was put up there in 1896, replacing a 1785 clock on a church that was built in 1756. It's on the Massachusetts. The church at end of clock is listed on the Massachusetts State Register of Historic Places. It has been deemed locally significant. Next slide, please. And me, I'm the clock master at Old South, and hopefully with me tonight on the call is the Reverend Scott DeBlock from Old South Church, and Janine Cunningham, who's an elder at the church, and Old South is supportive of this project. I manage and maintain the clock in the steeple. That's me working on it right there, and most of the expenses in terms of keeping that over 100, 120, 130-year-old clock running come out of pocket. And I'm more than happy to do it as a neighbor of Old South. Next slide, please. That's why. You can see the face taken by drone. These pictures of the clock face taken by drone. It's rapidly deteriorating. These pictures were taken in the fall of last year. The Roman numeral 7 in particular on the left-hand picture. On the right-hand picture, Roman numeral 7, Roman numeral 8. You can even see deterioration on 3, 4, 12. There's almost no paint on the minute hands. And the same with on the minute pointers, and the same on the hands. There's the paint has deteriorated. So that's in a nutshell. You can see it for yourself why that needs to be attended to. Next slide, please. These are more up to date as of yesterday. Winter's been kind of tough on the clock. On the left-hand side, the numbers are getting even worse, and you can clearly see deterioration of the paint in the face in that lower picture. The boards now, it's you can see that the paint you can see the seams in the boards because of the loss of paint. On the right is the East Parish Church in Salisbury, the Methodist Church next to the CVS. That was done about 2 years ago now. The company that has given us the quote is to paint the old south clock is the same company that did that clock face. And you can see how clear the letters are, how distinct, and that the clock, the face of the clock, the black paint is in better shape as well. One side note, both the Newbury clock, the Newburyport clock, as many Newburyport clocks, tower clocks, and the Salisbury clock were generous donations or assisted by John T. Brown in 1895. He was the Western Union manager here in town and involved in just about every steeple clock. And I represent just a small group of clock masters that maintain all the clocks in the churches. Next slide, please. In terms of your decision making, we pretty much tick all the boxes around the evaluation criteria that the city has placed for historic preservation. The boxes we don't tick is that we're not open space and we're not housing. So that doesn't address those needs. And the clock is not a city-owned asset. But everything else in terms of the character of the city, we are a city of steeples. I know that Charleston, South Carolina probably has claimed that first, but we're better than them. And and the clock has is a great benefit to our tourism and really indicative of the city as a whole. And there's a lot of community support for the clock. Next slide, please. We've put out a call to the community. Everybody's noticed that the clock is deteriorating. This is just a sample of the letters that we've received. There's certainly a lot of support by the community. Everybody notices the clock. By the way, I'll just make a pitch for myself. For most of this clock's life, the city paid for the maintenance and paid an annual stipend to the clockmaster. I'm not here to ask for that. I'll be glad to do it out of the kindness of my heart, but that is a fact that the clocks were so important to the city of Newburyport that the city was actually responsible for maintaining the clock, keeping them on time. So that those days are long gone. But just to show you that the community is in support of this, I've already received commitment by community members as well as organizations. So people are going to put some skin in this game. Even though I'm asking for funding from the CPC, the community has expressed some interest in devoting some funding as well out of pocket. So I'm going to count on that from the community and have a fundraising campaign for their part of it. Next slide, please. And here's the budget. We're asking for $4,650. The community, I'm really confident that they will be a contribution of $500 raised from community members and neighbors. The budget includes any potential repairs and a contingency. Now, I've been asked specifically, and this is kind of late breaking information, whether we have noticed any rot or anything that we think will impact this number at all. And we've been able to take a close inspection of the wood from the inside, as well as through some peepholes in the clock. And it doesn't appear that there is any deterioration that is going to impact this number significantly. But we think we've got it covered. And we think the committee will provide some funds as well, so that they do have skin in this game. And American Renaissance is giving us a quote. They're the ones who did the clock in Salisbury. We're confident that they can do this clock as well. The significant part of the cost is getting the lift up there and having somebody work on the lift. So I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Jack, just not a question, one comment. I think there's a typo in the budget with your hand balancing at $50 an hour, which would be a bargain. I think he gets probably 150 an hour because the carryout number is 450. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, 3 hours at 50. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
committee-
per face. That's why it's 3 hours per face. 3 faces.
Gotcha. 3 faces. Okay.
Yeah,
I stand corrected. There we go. Joe Morgan, question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Jack, I asked this question when you presented in front of the Historical Commission. I was concerned that your contingency might be a low in case you were to find some further deterioration once you got up close to the actual clock face. And you still seem pretty certain that you can handle the scope with what you're showing here. But just as a hypothetical, what would happen if you were to discover some concealed rot conditions, or say that the substrates at the letters were no longer paintable? Or do you have a backup plan? Do you know what you would do? You mentioned that other projects use metal numerals. Would you go that direction?
Yeah, we could go in that direction. That is actually what the Titcomb Street Congregational Church did, where when they redid the clock, they replaced the numbers with aluminum, and I think they had those milled at the high school, if I remember correctly. So there was some savings associated with that. When I started on this project, I looked at that alternative, and I spoke to a lot of experts. We've decided not to go that route where we're going to replace them with milled aluminum or metal numbers. We want to stay true to the historical nature of the church, and the fact that we already have a preservation restriction on the church. So, why even kind of mess with that? So I'm really confident, based on your comments last time we went in there and said, yeah, let's take a real close look at this, that we're not going to get any surprises. And if we do, it's worked into those potential repairs, carpentry, as well as the contingency. But it would be a surprise. If in our furthest imagination, it's not going to be double, but I am also feel that the community will come together and make up for the difference if something like that does happen.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, Scott DeBlanc, you have your hand up.
I did. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great. I just want to affirm the work of Jack and what he is putting forward to you as co-interim pastor at South Street Church. And it's just one starting point for what we are about to work on, not only in our facilities, but in moving forward in ministry and mission in the town of Newburyport. And I want to thank Jack for all his work.
Thank you, Scott. Any other questions? Okay. Jack, thanks for your presentation tonight. We can move on now.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Next item is the Cushing House Architectural Preservation from the Historical Society of Old Newbury. And Okay, who is here to present?
This is Susan Edwards.
Hello, Susan.
Hello, and good evening to everybody, and thank you for inviting us to present our proposal tonight. We have been systematically working our way around the property, both in the house and the Perkins Mint building and the landscape. And it's time for us to focus on the exterior of the Cushing house and the architectural elements. Next slide, please. This is a three-phased project, as was our landscape project, to address the crown, the rope band, the bead, the dental moldings, the gutters, the freezeboard trim blocks, and the soffit and fascia trims, as well as the shutters. All of these elements are starting to deteriorate and are somewhat threatened. Next slide, please. Phase one is going to be a lot of assessment of the actual architectural elements. And they will all be custom milled to match the originals. Our primary goal is to save as much of the original 1808 element as we can, and at the same time provide functionality for the building, for example, with the shutters and the gutters. Next slide, please. What we have done, and actually this slide is a little bit hard to see, but I'm trying to show here the deterioration of some of the elements. So let's just go to the next slide. These are elements that have literally fallen off the moldings and into the gardens and along the sidewalk of the Fruit Street side of the house. And of course, it's always a concern for safety of visitors, but more importantly, we need to preserve these original architectural elements. Next slide. And here you can see a corner of the rotted elements, both the gutter and the bead molding and some of the freeze block trim. Next slide. This is on the north facade of the house, which is the facade that faces High Street. And if you look above the flag, again, you'll see deterioration. Next slide. And this is the Fruit Street side of the house, which is perhaps most deteriorated. It takes a lot of weather up there on High Street, and there's 214 years of wear and tear on the property. Next slide. The shutters have really suffered from the wind and the weather, both the fan light over the front door as well as the other shutters on the side. Over the last 3 years, we have done repair work on these shutters. And at this point, think that the best thing to do is to replace the shutters on the north facade of the house, matching the originals, and then to take the best from the other 3 sides of the house and restore those and replace them. Next slide, please. Actually, I think that may be it.
Yep, this is the last slide.
Thanks, Caitlin. So, as I said, our goals are to preserve as much of the original as we possibly can, to have functionality and visitor safety. And one of the things that I think perhaps was not stated as clearly in the application is that we have sought multiple bids on this. and have been working with preservation carpenters and want to make sure that it is true to the original work. Additionally, as with our previous applications to the committee, we are leveraging the CPC funds with other gifts, and if that is not possible, the museum will take money from its endowment income to match the CPC funds. So we're hoping that, as in the past, this will be an opportunity to leverage funds from the community and from our supporters to help preserve this National Historic Landmark. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Don Little?
Yeah, it's just a more curiosity question. The application states in the project timeline, the museum would be able to begin the project no later than early fall 2022. Phase 1 is expected to take 6 to 8 weeks to complete. My question would be, when is phase 2 and 3 planned tentatively?
The reason that I said fall was because I know the time that it takes with the city council votes, and that it probably wouldn't be reasonable to assume that we could start work until a contract was signed with the city in the fall. The first phase would need to be done in the fall. And then our hope is that we would continue, as with the landscape projects, applying to the CPC for funds, and to not take any breaks, that we would look at this over a 2 to 3 year period.
Very good, thanks.
Thank you.
Jane Healy?
Hi, thanks. You answered part of my question, because I was curious about the bids, because I only saw one in your application. I was wondering, could you tell us the date? If it was there, I missed it, of that bid, and also what you're finding with your other bids. Have you received numbers yet, and the dates of those bids? And yeah, I'm getting at the whole inflationary issue here.
Absolutely. The first bid that was included in the application was received in January. So very close to the application time. They had actually been working on it since the fall, but gave us the final numbers in January. There are 2 other companies who are also working on bids. So far, it looks like one of them is going to be the same range as the bid in the application. And we are still waiting on the bids from the third preservation team.
Okay, thank you. And my second question was about your preservation restriction. I saw something that you have a 10-year one, is that correct? But you are about to receive one in perpetuity?
Exactly. We have a 10-year one, which runs out in 2027, and that's with Mass Historical Commission. And we agreed to have a perpetual preservation restriction with the the Newburyport Historical Commission. All of the work has, for that preservation restriction with the attachments, have gone to Mass Historical Commission, and we are only waiting. They have pre-approved it, and we are now waiting for their final approval and then the signature process, which hopefully won't take too long. We hope to have it within the next few months, 2 or 3 months. They're short-staffed, as many organizations are. And my understanding is that Michael Steinitz, who is responsible for the preservation restriction program, is still working remotely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay. Don Walters.
Yes, would you mind clarifying what you just mentioned with respect to a preservation restriction being held by the Newburyport? Was it the Newburyport Historical Commission?
Yes.
And I was under the impression, perhaps, some regulations have changed, that if it's held by the municipality, or in this case, the NHC, the term of the restriction is 25 years, doesn't go into perpetuity. And I appreciate that's really a technicality. I'm just trying to be sure we get all the facts out. Thanks.
My understanding is that the current, as I said, the one we have currently with Mass Historical Commission is a 10-year restriction, but the one with the city of Newburyport would be perpetual.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any questions from members of the public? Okay, seeing none. Thank you for the presentation, and we'll move on to the next applicant.
Thank you.
Heritage Tree Preservation proprietors of Oak Hill Cemetery,
Hi, sweetie.
Glee Woodworth.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Okay, great. How's everybody doing?
we lost you, Glee. We can't hear you any longer.
You can't hear me?
Well, stay up close to your microphone.
Okay. All right.
There we go.
So, okay, so just follow if you can't hear me again. So thank you very much. So Oak Hill, as you know, 1842, it was established. It is still an active burial ground. It's one of the first landscape garden cemeteries in the country. I've been working at Oak Hill since 2007. We've been very proactive in different projects. The Granite Chapel, Brown Chapel project, some restoration there, over 600 gravestones and 75 curbings restored. Planted about 21 trees. We planted gardens, cleared lots of brush. You couldn't see several hundred gravestones when I first started working. And I'm currently also in the wintertime, I work on a database. I have over 11,000 names of those who are buried in Oak Hill. And I'm also taking photos of every single burial lot, of every single gravestone and inscription. The late Jeff Ott of the Northeast Shade Tree Company, he said back in 2008 and 9 that Oak Hill has one of the best heritage tree examples in northern New England. And late Jeff Ott and his company, they specialize in heritage trees, which are over 100 years old. They've worked in Atkinson Common also. And so we have some of the oldest trees in Newburyport, as well as Atkinson Common does too. We're a historic asset. We're passive recreation. We have people coming through the cemetery, dozens every day, and that traffic has increased with the Clipper City rail trail right alongside. In CPC funds we received in 2008 and 9, $35,000. And if you remember, a few years later, we had that huge windstorm. There was 90 miles an hour winds recorded down at Plum Island. And because of the CPC funds that saved many of the heritage trees, they were safe during this storm. We did lose some smaller trees, some pine trees, but the trees that Jeff and his guys worked on were saved, and we didn't have any damage in those winds. Financially, I just want to talk about cemeteries in general in small towns and cities. They're not money-making businesses. Our endowment is now stable. We were in serious trouble a few years ago, but now it's okay. It's growing. But that said, the income for Oak Hill and other cemeteries, we have burial lot sales and we have the funeral fees. But that doesn't pay for the two part-time workers, myself and the superintendent, Jim Smith. We don't break even with that income. So we do need our endowment to help us out. The landscaping will cost between $25,000 to $30,000 a year. That's cutting all the grass, blowing leaves, the cleanup of, we have usually dead limbs coming down, and Jimmy and I can clean up that and do that work. We do not bring in tree companies to just do that work. We can do that. And in 2020, the 10,000 you funded for us, again, it was Northeast Shade Tree. Again, they specialize in the heritage trees. They are tree climbers. They don't bring in bucket trucks, and for other jobs they might if they need to. But the bucket trucks could never ever reach where they're able to climb up in these trees. And they are very, very bird and animal friendly. They won't take down any nests or limbs that have any kind of nests in there. So back in 2020, if you go into Oak Hill, the main entrance, there's 30 yards on the right, there was a dead tree. And Jimmy and I thought it would come down one day in a windstorm, but it never did. So the guys volunteered to take and lop off the top limbs. And I asked them to, okay, about 25 or 30 feet, and leave the trunk with the holes in it, because we're hoping that animals, so forth, birds, owls, wood ducks would nest. And sure enough, I don't know if you've heard, we have a gray little screech owl who now is nesting in that tree. And when I ask people, people have asked me about why did you leave that dead tree there? I said, for the purpose of the birds and the owls and so forth. Sure enough, we have a gray owl nesting in the top hole, and we also have a red owl nesting in another tree close to the water tower. And Sue McGrath, the Newburyport birder, was just absolutely thrilled. And she said, this is a perfect example why you try to leave some of those dead trunks out for bird life. Northeast Shade Tree will be donating. They have already donated 2 days work, and they'll be donating another couple days work because they just absolutely love Oak Hill. And when they're in the area, they always drive through to check on our trees. So that's a summary. And do you have any questions?
My favorite picture is your truck in there. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was helping the guys clean up.
Yeah. Any questions from the committee? Okay. Any questions from the public? Okay. Seeing none. Thank you for your presentation, Clea.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye now.
Last but not least, I will take off my chair of the CPC hat, put on my chair of the Open Space Committee hat, and basically say that once again, the application says it all, and says it very similarly to years past. But the potential is still there to be hit with opportunities, some likely to be in the significant 7-figure, 8-figure range. And we got to build our savings account to be able to jump in with partners and take those opportunities when they present themselves. And that's all I'll say. Is there any question? Okay, thank you. Any other business from the planning director? No, I have no further new business.
Sorry, I was muted
confirm-
there. No, nothing, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Any a motion to approve the minutes of February 23rd, 2022. Is there a second?
I just had one question on, let's see, it was a part C, letter from the Parks Department regarding Bartlett tree specimen. In the second paragraph, it says they would like to plant an additional 46 larger size trees. Was that 46 or 426?
Not sure I
I'm sorry.
remember.
And I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you, Paul. This is
Oh.
Rachel. So I
Oh,
can't,
hi.
I didn't hear what section you were referring.
Section C, the letter from the Parks Department about the Bartlett trees, specimen tree grant. In the second paragraph, at the end of the second paragraph, says they would like to plant an additional 46 larger trees. Was it really 46 trees or was it 426?
Boy, I don't remember.
This is Don Little. I looked that up. It was 46. It's over a
Really?
period of time, though.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought that somehow they were getting 46 trees, 7,000. Okay, never mind then.
Chuck Griffin, you
I
had
was
your
just
hand
going
up?
to clarify it. Yes, there's 46 more trees to be planted, and this excess of money would go toward that.
Right.
It in no way covers the cost.
Right.
Right, okay.
I'll second the motion. I don't think it's been seconded.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, then vote on approval of minutes. I'll take a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody say nay? Nobody said nay. Thank you. Okay, Caitlin, confirm the next meeting date for me.
Yep, the next meeting date and next round of presentations will be April 7th at 7 p.m. on Zoom.
Okay, do you have any idea whether or not we'll have those bonding schedules before that time?
I can send that around, yes. I have that from Ethan Manning. I can send that around to everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, anything else from any of you folks? Hearing none, then this meeting is adjourned by unanimous nodding of your heads. How's that?
Very
Okay.
good. Okay.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank you.
Good
night.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night,
Good night.
everybody.
Right.